Kirby is something else. In Super Smash Bros. Melee, Kirby is commonly argued to be the #1 worst character in the game, and there are many reasons for this. Kirby is commonly placed at the very bottom of every Melee tier list in the modern meta, only just recently being placed the second worst character in the game, right above Bowser. This doesn't save Kirby from much, because he's crazy unviable in Super Smash Bros. Melee. It's truly not an understatement just how bad he is in the fast-paced meta. It was most likely a purposeful attempt by Sakurai himself to nerf one of the best characters that was in Smash 64. Kirby was a really dominant character in that game, having really broken hitboxes like Kirby's up tilt, and his up tilt was just overly large for no reason. On top of that, there were multiple nerfs to Kirby's KO power, his range, survivability, and priority on his attacks, basically making him into a shell of what he formerly was in that game. It was clear an attempt by the creators to neuter Kirby's options, but in all honesty, it just seems like they nerfed him too hard if you ask me. Kirby is hardly seen in actual competitive play whatsoever. He is heavily outshined by pretty much any character in the cast. You wouldn't see people use Kirby seriously unless a top player is trying to troll or make a point that they're just better than you. Kirby is not a character like Roy, where maybe you can try to work with the character, and if you're extremely talented, you can maybe do some work. Honestly, it's not really the point with Kirby. If you're trying to play Kirby, you are better off picking another character like Jigglypuff, who just in general is sort of similar to Kirby, but has actual decent aerial drift, much better KO power, and I mean, look at Kirby. He just wants to be Puff so bad. You can really just see that Kirby is just not used at all in competitive Melee, unless you're throwing or you're trying to stunt on your opponent. That's just how unviable Kirby is in Melee. Reason 2, Kirby has no KO power. I mentioned this earlier with my point on Puff. It shouldn't be an understatement in Melee's fast-paced engine. It's important in Melee to have decent KO power and range, because the very best characters in the game are capable in KO power especially. He does have a semi-decent back air, but even that is a bit of a stretch because Melee, Puff's back air exists, so if you're trying to contend with the best back airs, you gotta contend with Puff, who virtually does the same thing with her back air, but Jigglypuff is just way better. And speaking of other things, Kirby has virtually no range, and this is reason 3. Like I previously stated in my Nest video that I made, having no range doesn't help you at all in Melee. When characters like Marth and Sheik exist, how is a character like Kirby going to contend with other characters? Kirby's aerials are incredibly stubby, and it seems like his forward air was made to be used for a approaching, or maybe if it was more disjointed, it would be better at that. His neutral air isn't really strong at approaching at all, and neither is his up air. Down air can be possibly used off stage, but it's not really that safe because it has some startup to the move. And his tilts are also short range. While they are pretty decent at racking up damage, they aren't really good in general. And his grab is alright. While his initial grab has some decent range, which is actually one of his few positives, but his actual grabs that he has, his throws, are some of the worst in the game, because you can actually mash out of some of Kirby's grabs, and he's one of the only character in the game where you can mash out of his grabs. There are so many characters in the meta that just straight out outrange Kirby, which makes it impossible for Kirby to approach, which is a common negative of all the low tier characters in the meta. And if you lack range, it's going to make characters like Marth, more specifically, impossible to face. Kirby's survivability. Kirby is a very lightweight character, which unless Kirby can offset this weakness with maybe really high KO power, kind of similar to Jigglypuff, but the fact that Kirby dies really early and doesn't have any KO power to offset this, unless he is able to maneuver and just overcome his opponents, but even if he's trying to do that, it's asking a lot from Kirby. Straight up, Kirby is just going to have to avoid his opponent's moves in order to get in the neutral. This is another reason why the top tiers in Melee are going to curb stomp Kirby, because they exclusively just have really explosive KO power compared to him, and they have actual good combo flows that can take advantage of Kirby's low weight and lack of survivability. Not only that, even though Kirby's recovery is not considered the worst, because he does have multiple jumps like Jigglypuff, however, his up B is not really something that is really reliant. It's just easy to edge guard and just really predictable. Kirby's lack of approach options also hurts him a lot, which is reason 5. Kirby has a slow and short wave dash, awful airspeed, poor range, and overall laggy, weak moves. He has no viable projectiles unless you count the Falco matchup with the Falco power-up. He doesn't really have any edge in any of the higher tier matchups. Kirby has a lackluster combo game, long startup, cooldown periods, which makes it harder for Kirby to juggle characters in the cast. Oh, don't worry, honest content, I'll just spam down B. Yeah, well, that move is horrible in competitive play because it's incredibly slow and easy to punish. So I mean, if you want to, I guess you can, if you want. Really, the only fun Kirby's gonna have in Melee is if he gets Falco's lasers, because then it's a little bit more fun. But other than that, it's just not.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Are you following me now?
Kirby versus Jigglypuff. Now, I stated this earlier in the video, it really shouldn't be an understatement on how Kirby is just straight up outshined by Jigglypuff in this game, and very much of the aspects of Jigglypuff are what Kirby is trying to be but can't. First off, Puff just doesn't have the same aerial drift speed as Puff. Because Puff lacks a proper up B recovery like Kirby, that means Jigglypuff was given more aerial drift to try to offset Puff's recovery. Kirby, however, has less aerial drift, which means Puff in general is just going to be way better off stage, and you would think that Puff would have rather less aerial drift and maybe a more proper up B recovery, because that's what Kirby has. Ironically, this doesn't make comboing off stage as easy, because Puff, while she doesn't have a traditional recovery up B, her aerial drift just means she's just killer off stage, with things like the Wall of Pain, which is something Jigglypuff is really good at off stage. Kirby can still do similar things like that, like he can try to Wall of Pain, but just Jigglypuff in general is just going to be way better at doing that because Puff's back air is really good. Also, Kirby lacks a lot of KO power, which isn't something that Jigglypuff has a problem with. Jigglypuff has a rest, which is one of the best KO moves in the game when hit, which Kirby would kill for an option like that, but Kirby's special moves overall are just horrible in comparison. Puff's smash attacks aren't the best in the game, but they are better than Kirby's, who would really kill for half of the options that Jigglypuff just has in general. It's pretty obvious that Kirby is straight up outshined by Puff. Now, I'm not saying Jigglypuff and Kirby need to be the same character and la-di-da, Kirby just needs to become Puff. I'm not saying that, because Kirby is sort of a similar archetype, similar style to Jigglypuff. However, Kirby just doesn't have the same viable moveset that makes him actually usable in tournament, which would be nice. He doesn't have proper KO power in his moveset to make him into a character that can contend with other characters in the cast. It's clear that Kirby was created to be nerfed from his Smash 64 version, but this version of the character is really a shell of what he formerly was, to the point where there's really no reason to use Kirby in any situation in Melee competitively. So to shut the book on Kirby in Melee, Kirby is a lackluster character to say the least, and he's commonly argued to be the number 1 or 2 worst characters in the game, in the same tier as Bowser. He isn't powerful, he's really slow, he has lackluster range, poor survivability, just straight up isn't good at all. So transitioning to Project M. Thankfully, the Project M devs, they knew Kirby was a bad character, and thankfully he was buffed heavily during the transition to Project M. He was even buffed in Project Plus, receiving a new grounded down B, which actually kind of helps his moveset. But let's go over some of the Project M changes. There's a long list of changes he was given. Kirby is heavier, he dashes much faster on ground, his airspeed is significantly faster than it was before, so he can go off stage a little bit easier. All his tilts retain his brawl speeds, which is actually much stronger than the melee versions of these moves. His dash attack has less end lag and propels Kirby forward much faster, in addition to hitting its consecutive hits a lot easier. This means it's just a way better combo tool and can actually set up edge guards really well. All his smash attacks have less startup lag, which is really helpful. They're actually just incredibly faster in general. And all his grounded attacks just feel way better in Project M. His aerials. Neutral air is now much faster and doesn't have nearly as much lag, dealing a much stronger hit, increased knockback also if it's sweet spotted. He has his forward air that links much better and is way better at racking up damage, while having its landing hitbox on the move removed, thus giving Kirby a much more efficient way to go off stage and hit people with this move. Back air has way more range, similar to the Smash 64 version of this move. Up air now semi-spikes, which is kind of similar to Captain Falcon and Ganondorf's up airs, making it a lot better. Down air is now significantly faster on startup and inflicts way more damage, acting as a way better edge guarding move than it previously was in Melee. All his throws, except his down throw follow-ups, are now incredibly better for Kirby's KO ability. They're just all buffed in general. His down throw is a really good combo throw, for example. Forward throw and back throw can no longer be escaped out of, thank God. and also they're just way better throws in general. Down air specifically can actually be used really good at racking up damage. It links into his forward smash. His inhale has faster startup. Kirby can now use moves also while he's in midair. Attacks with low enough knockback don't cause tumbling, so no longer Kirby can lose his copy abilities that way. And most his copy abilities are improved to match the character's overall neutral abilities and just way faster ground speed. He's just a way faster character in general in Project M and Project Plus. He can also go vertically and horizontally with his up B, which really helps his recovery a lot. Also, his side B hammer can be used in the air as kind of a really good anti-air tool. All in all, just Kirby in general is just way better in this game. His specials are all faster. Pretty much everything I stated was wrong with him in the previous version is built on and improved on in Project M. Although the irony is he is ranked in the exact same tier that he ranked in Melee in 3.6, being arguably the worst character in the game still, which is a little funny. However, he is still finally viable in the cast despite his low placements on the tier list. Doesn't mean Kirby can't be played in the meta, because he's actually still a pretty strong character, I would say, even though he's probably ranked in the lower end of the tier list. Ironically, also, I think he's probably better than Puff right now in the meta in Project Plus, which is kind of funny because Puff just outshined Kirby just hands down. He still has some of the same problems though that he has in Melee, like for example he's still a lightweight character, but he does have an improved recovery, improved KO power, and much better combo flows, and just overall is a much stronger character in general. Kirby's biggest strength is his offstage capabilities now because he has multiple jumps and his just offstage game is much better in Project M. However, because other characters in Project M are much stronger than they previously were, that means Kirby is going to have a tough time dealing with a cast of characters that are all around just as good as him now, if not better. He wouldn't actually have to deal with this problem in Melee because he was just bad in general, but now that he's buffed to kind of everyone else's level, he kind of has to deal with that now. So he is overall buffed in Project M and Project Plus, but we're just going to have to see as time goes on if he truly can compete with the big dogs or not, because he does still have some of the same issues because the cast in Project Plus is a lot better than what they were in Melee as well. But don't get me wrong, Kirby is still a decent character in Project Plus, and I recommend you trying him out if you're interested. Alright you guys, thank you guys for watching. There's a Patreon down below if you want to get videos early, and shoutouts to my patrons who support the channel. Also, if you guys are interested, make sure you like and comment and subscribe for more content. Peace out, and you guys have a good one.
Just pick a top tier. You want to win, yo? Pick a fucking top tier.